right, so how would you, in your own words, define civics?
Civics is really the study of the American Constitution and a look at public life and the role that people play in both. I think a big part of civics education is teaching them the importance of why they need to get involved.
We have the right to vote, we have the right to protest due to the First Amendment, right to assembly.
You have to know your history, so I feel like it's very important that you know and study your government, because you can't complain about it if you don't know how it works.
Well, you're always gonna stand up for what you believe in. So if you believe that a certain law should not be passed, you can protest or something. If you believe that a certain law should be passed, you can write a proposal to a senator.
We're gonna talk a little bit about trial by jury.
I learned that it was something that we have as a right, and I hope I get chosen for jury duty one day.
Here we are, Your Honor. And you get a robe, too. Comes with a chair.
I didn't know that the Supreme Court people could work their whole lives in that one job.
My favorite would have to be the civil rights movement. I think it's important because a lot of things that activists fought for back then are still fighting for now. I look at it and I take it on and I say, oh, I have to do something about it, you know? I have to try and fix it.
In order to preserve our democracy, we really need to understand where our students are at and where they need to be in order to be able to participate.
If people really stood up for what they believed in, it could really change everything. And those few people, without knowing it, they have the power to really change society.
What is geography?
Maps.
Maps. Rivers and mountains.
State capitals.
Studying continents. Geography is the world around us. What is geography, and why does it matter? Why bother teaching it to us? Geography is more than studying maps.
Or identifying countries or capitals. It's the study of the interaction between people and places and things across the Earth.
And we need that broad understanding to help us all address local, regional, national, and global problems.
Understanding how everything affects everything else, knowing about yourself and understanding others and other cultures, traditions, laws, and economics is necessary to our lives.
If we don't understand the physical world around us,
we won't know about our effect on nature and nature's effect on us.
If we don't know much about how we live in our community or in the world,
we can't make smart decisions.
If we don't know about different cultures,
we lose important parts of what unites us all as people.
If we don't know about geography,
we'll be left with nothing to help us navigate our future.
America's students' knowledge of geography hasn't changed much over the years.
So we need a strong foundation to help us understand our complex and diverse world.
History is so important. We need to learn from the past. We need to learn from that history and not make the same mistakes, but also maybe learn new ways of doing things.
We want education that teaches us the true nature of this decadent society.
Me and my group, we're doing a group performance about the Black Panther Party and their Chicago chapter that was led by Fred Hampton.
What we try to do is make history relevant for young people to study and help them understand that in the process of doing history, they're learning skills, research skills, they're learning interpretation, critical thinking skills, they're learning presentation skills, writing.
For me, I was like, it's history, like it's in the past. And I realized this affects stuff happening now, and history shapes the future, so without history, we have no future.
We are doing a group performance, and it's about the First Ladies and how they deal with the triumphs and tragedies of their husbands' presidencies.
Back then, there wasn't a lot of political roles for women, and they stepped in, especially Eleanor Roosevelt, definitely paved a way for the rest of the women of today.
It's important that we continue to have the NAEP assessment because it reminds us of the work that we need to do. That helps us think about ways to make history more interesting, more relevant, more exciting for young people. It helps us learn how we might change the way it's taught in schools by how much kids understand and how they can use the information.
Now that I see how interesting history is, the fact that how it shaped us now, how like things the Black Panthers did like help the community, and I didn't know much about that, it just makes me wonder about all the other things in history I might not know that helped form our future today.
All right, so how would you, in your own words, define civics?
Civics is really the study of the American Constitution and a look at public life and the role that people play in both. I think a big part of civics education is teaching them the importance of why they need to get involved.
We have the right to vote. We have the right to protest due to the First Amendment, right to assembly.
You have to know your history, so I feel like it's very important that you know and study your government, because you can't complain about it if you don't know how it works.
Well, you always gotta like stand up for what you believe in. So like, if you believe that a certain law should not be passed, you can protest or something. If you believe that a certain law should be passed, you can write a proposal to a senator.
We're going to talk a little bit about trial by jury.
I learned that it was something that we have as a right, and I hope I get chosen for jury duty one day.
Here we are, Your Honor. And you get a robe, too. Comes with the chair.
I didn't know that the Supreme Court people could work their whole lives in that one job.
My favorite would have to be the civil rights movement. I think it's important because a lot of things that activists fought for back then are still fighting for now. I look at it and I take it on and I say, oh, I have to do something about it, you know? I have to try and fix it.
In order to preserve our democracy, we really need to understand where our students are at and where they need to be in order to be able to participate.
If people really stood up for what they believed in, it could really change everything. And those few people, without knowing it, they have the power to really change society.
What is geography?
Maps.
Maps. Rivers and mountains.
State capitals.
Studying continents. Geography is the world around us. What is geography, and why does it matter? Why bother teaching it to us? Geography is more than studying maps.
Or identifying countries or capitals. It's the study of the interaction between people and places and things across the earth.
And we need that broad understanding to help us all address local, regional, national, and global problems.
Understanding how everything affects everything else, knowing about yourself and understanding others and other cultures, traditions, laws, and economics is necessary to our lives.
If we don't understand the physical world around us,
we won't know about our effect on nature and nature's effect on us.
If we don't know much about how we live in our community or in the world,
we can't make smart decisions.
If we don't know about different cultures,
we lose important parts of what unites us all as people.
If we don't know about geography,
we'll be left with nothing to help us navigate our future.
America's students' knowledge of geography hasn't changed much over the years.
So we need a strong foundation to help us understand our complex and diverse world.
History is so important. We need to learn from the past. We need to learn from that history and not make the same mistakes, but also maybe learn new ways of doing things.
We want education that teaches us the true nature of this decadent society.
Me and my group, we're doing a group performance about the Black Panther Party and their Chicago chapter that was led by Fred Hampton.
What we try to do is make history relevant for young people to study and help them understand that in the process of doing history, they're learning skills, research skills, they're learning interpretation, critical thinking skills. They're learning presentation skills, writing.
For me, I was like, it's history, like it's in the past. And I realized this affects stuff happening now, and history shapes the future, so without history, we have no future.
We are doing a group performance, and it's about the First Ladies and how they deal with the triumphs and tragedies of their husbands' presidencies.
Back then, there wasn't a lot of political roles for women, and they stepped in, especially Eleanor Roosevelt, definitely paved a way for the rest of the women of today.
It's important that we continue to have the NAEP assessment because it reminds us of the work that we need to do. That helps us think about ways to make history more interesting, more relevant, more exciting for young people. It helps us learn how we might change the way it's taught in schools by how much kids understand and how they can use the information.
Now that I see how interesting history is, the fact that how it shaped us now, how like things the Black Panthers did like help the community, and I didn't know much about that, it just makes me wonder about all the other things in history I might not know that helped form our future today.
Welcome to today's virtual release of the nation's report cards in Civics, Geography, and U.S. History, presented by the National Assessment Governing Board and the National Center for Education Statistics. Before we begin, a few housekeeping notes. All attendees will be muted. You can type your questions to our presenters using the Ask a Question to the Presenter box. Feel free to send in your questions throughout the event, and we will try to answer as many as we can. You can enable closed captioning by clicking the CC icon on the bottom of the screen. There will be a red line below the icon when closed captioning is enabled. If you experience any technical problems, please follow the help link for general tips and click the Need Help box to chat with a technical support agent. Finally, the event is being recorded. The event recording will be available on the Governing Board's website, nagb.gov, after the event. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to Governor Haley Barbour, the chair of the National Assessment Governing Board, to kick us off.
Thank you, Jenna. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us at this virtual release event. I'm Haley Barbour, chairman of the National Assessment Governing Board. The National Assessment Governing Board includes 26 representatives of education stakeholders vested in the success of the National Assessment of Education Progress, or NAEP, also known as the nation's report card. The board sets policy for NAEP and includes such stakeholders as state legislators, teachers, testing experts, as well as members of the general public and the business community. Originally, we had planned an in-person event to release the results of the 2018 Nations Report Cards in U.S. History, Geography, and Civics, 3 subjects vital to our students' education. and their effective participation in our republic. But as it turns out, it's our civic responsibility to gather virtually. To start us off, it's my great honor and pleasure to introduce Senator Lamar Alexander of Tennessee. Throughout his exemplary career in public service, he served as governor of Tennessee, as U.S. Secretary of Education, as well as senator from his home state. Senator Alexander has been a stalwart supporter of NAEP for 35 years. It's a treat for me to welcome him. Senator?
Well, thank you, Haley. I want to make sure you can hear me all right.
Yes, sir.
Great. I'm calling in from Tennessee, and I thank you very much for inviting me today. You mentioned 35 years ago, I was governor of Tennessee then, and Secretary Bill Bennett, inspired by Checker Finn, called me and asked me to lead the so-called Alexander James Study Group on the National Assessment of Educational Progress, and that group recommended the creation of what came to be called the National Assessment Governing Board to oversee the National Assessment for Educational Progress. Now, I said to that group at the time, look, you go to sleep before you finish saying the name of this thing, so let's call it something that people will pay attention to, and out of that came the nation's report card. We said then that the decision makers needed to see the facts clearly. The nation's report card has become the most reliable instrument in elementary and secondary education to enable state and local leaders to make decisions about how to help our country's students, and these measurements are especially critical in United States history, civics, and geography, where students aren't otherwise tested regularly the same way we test them in reading, math, and science. Without the nation's report card, we wouldn't have any reliable way to measure students' progress in some of the most important subjects that our students need to know. The first speech we make on the floor of the United States Senate is still called the Maiden Address, and in 2003 I made mine about the intersection of two urgent concerns that I said would determine our country's future. I told my colleague senators that these were also the two topics I cared the most about. One, the education of our children, and two, the principles that unite us as Americans. It's time that we put the teaching of American history and civics back in its rightful place in our schools, I said then, so that our children can grow up learning what it means to be an American. We can't ask our children to be productive citizens without teaching them history. I proposed creating summer academies for outstanding teachers in American history. The next year, Congress created presidential and congressional academies to motivate better teaching and better learning of the key events, persons, and ideas that shape our nation. These presidential and congressional academies were later authorized in 2015 with the passage of the Every Student Succeeds Act. Some of the inspiration for that law came from the success that we'd had in the 80s working with the National Geographic Society to put geography back in the school curriculum by supporting teachers of geography as they work to inspire their students about the world we live in. As we've seen in past nation's report card reports, there's always a lot of progress to be made in teaching our children the importance of civics, geography, and United States history. Unfortunately, our lowest scores for high school students are often not in math and science, they're in American history. I've seen all this from many different vantage points as governor, university president, education secretary, and now senator. And all through that time, I've done all I can to return these important subjects to their rightful place in the classroom. Nothing's more important than helping our children understand the unique freedoms and the opportunities that make the idea of America so special. So the nation's report card results released today and each year are a critical measure of where we are and where we need to go. I thank you for your important work. I'm glad that it will carry on so that our children's children grow up learning what it means to be an American.
Thank you, Lamar, for getting us off to a great start. Now I want to introduce James Lynn Woodworth, the Commissioner of the National Center for Education Statistics, which administers NAEP. Lynn?
Good afternoon. I'm Lynn Woodworth, the Commissioner of the National Center for Education Statistics, known as NCES. It's a privilege to be here with you today, at least virtually, to participate in the release event for the results of the NAEP Civics, Geography, and U.S. History Assessment. As NCES Commissioner, I'm opening up the official statistics portion of today's event. The portion of today's event that's around statistics needs to be kept separate from the policy aspects of the rest of the event. And we'll close at the end of the question and answer period after Associate Commissioner Carr's presentation of the results. NAEP was created to fulfill the second half of NCS's congressional mandate to report on the condition and progress of education in the states and territories, a mandate that dates back to 1867 when the first Federal Department of Education, which became NCES, was chartered by Congress. NCS is proud to be the agency responsible for NAEP program, from designing and administering each assessment to reporting the results of each assessment to the American public. Today at 12:01 EM Eastern Time, NCS officially released the results of the performance of U.S. 8th graders on the 2018 National Assessment of Education Progress, assessments in U.S. history, civics, and geography. In my commissioner's statement, which accompanied the release of the results, I highlighted key takeaway points that hopefully you will glean from the presentation of results today. Results showed declines compared to 2014 in 2 of the 3 social studies subjects, U.S. history and geography. These declines were particularly evident among our lowest performers. The declines in U.S. history were pervasive. There were declines across various historical themes, most of the performance distribution, and various subgroups. Finally, across the 3 subjects, a quarter or fewer of 8th graders were at or above NAEP proficient, while a quarter or more are below NAEP basic. Please keep in mind that NAEP proficient refers to a solid mastery over challenging subject matter. It is my pleasure now to introduce Dr. Peggy Carr, who will be presenting the full results from the assessment. In the context of our statistical standards, Dr. Carr will detail results over time for U.S. students overall and for different student groups, highlighting performance for the NAEP achievement levels, NAEP Basic, NAEP Proficient, and NAEP Advanced. Dr. Carr is the Associate Commissioner for Assessment at NCES, a role she has held for nearly 2 decades. She is responsible for NCES's portfolio of national and international large-scale assessments, including NAEP, the Program for International Student Assessments, or PISA, Trends in International Mathematics and Science Study, Progress in International Reading and Literacy Study, and the Program of International Assessment and Adult Competencies. Dr. Carr.
Thank you, Commissioner. I am certainly pleased to share the results from the 2018 NAEP Social Studies Assessments, U.S. History, Civics, Geography, and History. I can say that 5 years ago, when we released these results, I can recall there were no changes. It was a pretty flat set of results that we were sharing. But today we're going to see a different pattern, some changes. I think we're going to start out by looking at or sort of seeing what it is students were actually asked to do. What were students performing, how they were asked to perform on these assessments, I should say. Let's take a look.
Today's 8th graders will soon be tomorrow's adult citizens, and their knowledge of our nation's history, the functions of government, and our world and its inhabitants will be important to our nation's future. To better understand what students know and can do in these important areas, in 2018, NAEP assessed 8th graders' knowledge and skills in U.S. history, civics, and geography. In the U.S. history, the NAEP assessment asked students to demonstrate their knowledge of 4 U.S. history themes: democracy, culture, technology, and world role. And these themes covered 8 time periods of our nation's history. Students who performed at or above the proficient level demonstrated a variety of skills, including the ability to explain the significance and connection of people, places, events, ideas, and documents, recognize opportunities, perspectives, and challenges of a diverse population, and understand historical themes while citing evidence from primary and secondary sources to support conclusions. In civics, NAEP measures students' performance in 5 content areas: civic life, politics, and government, foundation of the American political system, the purposes, values, and principles of American democracy, relationship of the United States to other nations, and roles of citizens in American democracy. In addition, the civics assessment measures students' intellectual and participatory skills as well as civic dispositions. The NAEP proficient students can explain and understand differences between government and civic society and American ideas and reality, separation of powers among branches of government, and how citizens can influence government and events that have international consequences. In geography, the NAEP measures 3 content areas: space and place, environment and society, spatial dynamics and connections. It also measured 3 cognitive areas: knowing, understanding, applying. And NAEP proficient students can understand, describe, and explain fundamental vocabulary, analytical concepts, physical and cultural features, and regional patterns. Locational questions requiring integration of 2 or more geographic sources. Case studies about how regions influence trade and migration patterns and cultural and political interaction. Let me give you a brief overview of our data collection efforts before I share the results. We administered the assessment between January and March of 2018 to over 13,000 students in civics geography and 16,000 students for U.S. history. 2018 marked the first time we administered these assessments digitally. We assigned paper and digital assessments randomly to students and use both samples to produce the 2018 results you'll see today. I'd like to first remind you all of the big picture results that Dr. Woodworth shared in his introductory remarks. Since 2014, two out of the 3 subjects showed a decline: U.S. history and geography. Civics, well, the results there were flat. But over the long term, as you can see here, civics and U.S. history have improved, while geography scores showed no difference from the first time we assessed these subjects. I want to start my review with the civics results. And before I share the results, I want to highlight some of the questions that students were asked to respond to. Starting here with civics, this is a multiple choice question, but I should point out that it represents only a type of question that students were asked. This is a multiple choice question. More of the questions, more of the time students were asked to spend really represented constructive response questions where they had to justify and explain their answer. For this particular question here, the Constitution requires the president's nomination to a superior court to be approved by the Senate. Students were asked to look at these various options and provide their choice, of course. I want to share that we actually put this question up on Twitter and asked you, our audience, what the right answer was. And I'm pleased to say that 69% of our Twitter followers gave the right response.
As for eighth graders, 40% of our students who answered this question were able to identify the correct answer. I'm going to now look into the overall results for civics, but I want to first orient you to the graph. This is the trend line of the average scores for the NAEP Civics assessment. Note here that it started in 1998. The average scores for each year are displayed here. An asterisk indicate scores that are significantly different from the score in 2018. To the right, you see cut points for the NAEP achievement levels, NAEP Basic, NAEP Proficient, and NAEP Advanced. In 2018, the average civics score was 153, not different from the score in 2014, but it was higher than the score in 1998. I'll also note here that none of the racial, ethnic, or gender subgroups showed any change compared to the previous assessment. It's important to dig underneath the average and look at trends for students across various performance levels. Here are the trend lines for students at selected percentiles. 10th and 25th, representing lower achieving students. 50th, those who perform near the average. And 75th and 90th, the higher performing students. Again, you see the achievement level cut points to the right to provide more context about students' performance at these percentiles. If you look at the last 2 years, you see no asterisks, indicating no change in scores across the percentiles. Over the long term, we did see improvement for lower performing students, that is those at the 10th and 25th percentiles, again indicated by the asterisk. Moving from scale scores to achievement levels, here's a chart of percentages of students reaching the achievement levels. At the top line, starting at the far left, you'll see that 27% are below NAEP Basic. 49% are at NAEP Basic. 21% are at NAEP Proficient, and 2% have reached the NAEP Advanced level. Based on unrounded numbers, 24% of students are at or above the NAEP Proficient in civics. This percentage is unchanged from any of the previous years. Over the long haul, the percentage of students below NAEP Basic is smaller. We're going to move on now to history. Okay, for those of you who missed the last question or did not respond on Twitter, here's another chance. Now, this question asked students about American Indians living east of the Mississippi River between 1800 and 1850. Most were forced to move west of the Mississippi River. Most were forced to work as slaves on plantations or encouraged to become American citizens or forced onto reservations. Well, the correct answer, of course, here is A, and 45% of our students were able to answer that question correctly. Here is the national trend line for the U.S. history assessment. As you can see from the asterisks, the score declined in recent years, but is higher than it was in 1994. For notable subgroup changes, there are for some of our racial ethnic groups, white, Black, Hispanic, and students who identified as 2 or more races. Also, both boys and girls all show declines compared to 2014. If you look across the percentiles, you'll see declines at the 10th, 25th, 50th, and 75th percentile compared to 2014. That overall decline that you see is being felt across the entire distribution except at the 90th percentile, our highest performing students. However, over the long haul, you see improvement at all percentiles except at the 90th. As mentioned in the overview, we also report scores for 4 U.S. history themes. This breakdown allows you to see how students perform within those history constructs. Compared to 2014, scores declined in all 4 themes: change in continuity in American democracy, noted here as democracy; gathering and interaction of people, culture, and ideas, noted here as culture; economic and technological changes and their relation to society, ideas, and environment, noted here as technology; and the changing role of America in the world, shown here as world role. Over the long term, scores improved in 2 things: democracy and world role, but decline in technology. In 2018, 15% of students reached or exceeded NAEP proficient in U.S. history. Half of the students were at NAEP basic, and about a third were below NAEP basic. In conjunction with score declines, we see a lower percentage at or above NAEP proficient compared to 2014. Over the long term, there was no change in the percentage of students at or above NAEP proficient, but a smaller percentage below NAEP basic. Now we're going to turn to our final subject, geography. I have one final question I want to share with you. Here we test student skills on locating cities around the world. You can test your own skills here as I reveal the results. As you can see, 26% of 8th graders got this question correct. That would be they got all of the answers correct. We did give partial credit if students gave some of the correct answers. In 2018, the average score declined from 261 in 2014 to 258. There was no change from the average score in 1994. Some notable subgroup declines are for both Black and white students, as well as both male and female students. Turning our attention to the percentile scores, we see that lower achieving students show declines compared to 2014. In the long term, higher achieving students declined while percentiles remained flat. Like U.S. history, we can also report on subscales for geography. There are 3: space and place, environment and society, and spatial dynamics and connections. Compared to 2014, there were declines in 2 of the 3 content areas: space and place, and environment and society. Around a quarter of the students met or exceeded the NAEP proficient cut point. This percentage did not change compared to 2014, but is lower than the 28% in 1994. The proportion of students below NAEP basic grew from 25% in 2014 to 29% in 2018. Now, to summarize, I'll just make a few points about takeaways. The percentage of students at or above NAEP proficient in these subjects notably are lower than in other subjects we typically report on, with U.S. history being the lowest amongst all NAEP assessments. But keep in mind that students must be able to both understand and explain complex content to reach these aspirational goals of NAEP proficient. In other words, these assessments require more than just memorization. As I end my presentation, I would like to thank the students, the teachers, the school officials, the NAEP staff, and the contractors to help make this assessment possible. We could not have done it with each and every one of them. I'll be happy to take questions at this point.
Good. The first question that we have from our audience is, the results show that economically disadvantaged students performed much lower than their peers who are not from disadvantaged backgrounds. The same has been true in reading and math. What message should we take from this?
Well, this is these series of assessments, the U.S. history, civics, and geography. They are challenging assessments. And I think that they are showing us nothing different in terms of how students perform on them than the reading and math. These students are struggling. And I think the students at the bottom of the distribution for all of these subjects, particularly those at the 10th percentile, are struggling the most. It's a signal, it's a big red flag that we need to dig deeper into what is happening with these students at the bottom of the distribution, largely populated and represented by students who are at the lower end of our income distribution. We have a lot of data about what students are doing in these classes, in their schools, what type of areas the teachers are focusing on. I would encourage people to go to our NAEP Data Explorer and dig into these data to develop the hypothesis that might lead us to more firm conclusions and estimations about what is going on with our students.
The next question, participant is commenting that 30 years ago, social studies was the central core of a curriculum program and reading was more peripheral. Essentially, in the place we are today, that's been flipped, but reading performance improvement has been sketchy and flat, and social studies has been too. Can you talk about how the two subjects are linked and what evidence points from NAEP we can provide to reconsider curriculum focus to social studies?
Well, you know, these social studies assessments, they have a lot of constructive response questions for the students to respond to and explain and justify their answers. They have to be able to read and understand and interpret what they're being able to ask. And if they're struggling with reading, they're going to struggle with this assessment if they're struggling to comprehend what they're being asked. Now, we, of course, do not administer our reading assessments to the same students that are administered these assessments. And so it's a hypothesis, an area for researchers to explore and analyze more closely. But I think the picture is very clear here.
We have a question asking, do the students feel that U.S. history or history in general is boring or not valuable to know?
Well, you know, I don't think we asked students that particular question, but we did ask something very similar to this notion that students aren't knowledgeable or don't feel confident in these subject areas. And what we found is that about 25 to 50% of the students said that they're not really confident that they know these facts and the events and periods and times that are associated with these questions that we're asking them about. And this is in sharp comparison to when we ask these same questions about reading and mathematics, where a half to 2/3 of the students feel that they're very confident in these subject areas. So students don't feel very good about what they know in these subjects.
Several people are asking about state level results, whether there are any for this, and when we might be able to expect those, if we might.
Well, we've never collected state level results for U.S. history, civics, or geography. It's something I think the governing board would really like to do moving forward. If you take a look at the schedule for the U.S. history and civics, further in the published schedule, there may be a state level assessment coming on board in a few years.
Another question on history. Were you surprised that the U.S. history results were so much worse than those for geography and civics, which tend not to be taught as separate subjects, and why might this be?
Well, I wasn't surprised because I've been reporting on these results for a while now, since the early 90s. And I can tell you this finding of the comparison of the three subjects has been quite consistent. The U.S. history is a challenging assessment. Students are asked about a lot of facts and people, places, events, and they're asked to make connections between them. A lot of critical thinking, higher order thinking skills are associated with all of these assessments, but it's particularly true of the history assessment. So no, I wasn't surprised. Sobering, of course, only 15% proficient, but not surprised.
I have a question about the connection between these and reading. To score well on these subjects, students need to be good readers. Can you comment on the link between this and scoring well on these tests?
Well, as I said earlier, you need those fundamental skills to be able to comprehend what you're being asked to do. And there's a lot of requirements for students to really read and understand and make the connections between the facts and the knowledge and the skills that represent the fundamental parts of these assessments. I think what we need to do moving forward is to better understand how these subjects connect. We're having opportunities, for example, to perhaps correlate these subjects in the future when we look into different designs moving forward. But for now, it's an association that we are observing that is very enlightening about the relationship between reading and these subjects. We know that students are asked to explain and justify their answers, and there's quite a bit of time that needs to be spent in this area on these subjects, about 50% or more of the time.
The question about the content of the history assessment. Are students tested with regard to understanding historical perspective, understanding context, understanding how to consider current issues in historical context, or did it test only facts?
What was that? Oh, you were not clear. Could you repeat the latter part of your question?
Yes, it was a question asking about whether students are tested about understanding historical perspective, context, and current issues in historical context, or did it test only facts?
Oh, no, not just facts. It's not just memorization. They needed to know those things, of course, but they needed to be able to make the connection between those facts, the events, people, places, the requirement to make higher order inferences about these facts and activities that happened in the past, historical events was a major part of what these assessments were about.
Can you clarify, was this assessment the first time to be delivered on a computer? And if so, did computer administration have anything to do with the lower results that you're seeing?
No, absolutely not. Let me first verify that this was the first digitally based assessment, but the results that we're seeing are the results associated with performance, not a change in the mode of the administration. And we know this because of the way we design the study, randomly assigning equivalent groups of students to paper versus digitally based assessment, and analyzing the data such that the trend, whether it's an increase or a decrease, the trend that we see is largely driven by the paper part of the study, not the digital component.
Great. I think we have time for one more question, which would be, do you think students will do better if the test was read to them?
No, I don't actually. What we're seeing here is that students don't know the content. They don't know the content. They don't know how to make the connections between the content. So I have no vision from my understanding of the findings that having the information read to them will make them perform better. Now, you know, you do have students that are perhaps struggling and reading, students at the bottom. Perhaps they will could perform a little better if they understood what they were being asked. But for the most part, we're seeing here that the students don't know the content and how to make those critical connections between the facts and the figures and the important things we need them to know. I think that if that was the last question, this concludes the statistical delivery of the results from the NCES part of the event. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I'm John Peety, Chairman of the National Endowment for the Humanities. The NEH is a federal agency dedicated to funding research, education, preservation, and public programs in the humanities. Since 1965, the NEH has invested in thousands of projects that illuminate the history of our nation. As we have just heard earlier, the latest report card reveals a disappointing decline in knowledge in U.S. history and overall low scores in civics among 8th grade students. Historical illiteracy in our youth has grave societal implications. For if one does not understand the founding ideals of our nation, then it is difficult to grow into a fully engaged citizen. We cannot ask our young adults to defend representative democracy unless we ensure first that they have a foundational understanding of its roots. As Thomas Jefferson said, if a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and will never be. Historical illiteracy will ultimately result in failures of domestic and foreign policy and in an economically weaker nation that is no longer a leader in innovation, much less a leader in humanistic areas such as moral reasoning and ethics. We must do everything we can as public officials, educators, and parents to ensure that we do not live in a bifurcated America where in-depth civics education and broad civic engagement are no longer a given. The Department of Education and NEH and other federal agencies cannot change this cultural drift ourselves, but we can make catalytic investments in those schools and civic organizations and projects that are trying to turn this trend around. As our nation approaches its 250th anniversary in 2026, NEH is devoting substantial resources to our new grant program, A More Perfect Union, and to the history and civics grants highlighted today. More than 20 years ago, NEH launched Excitement, a pioneering free educational website with hundreds of lessons plans, teachers' guides, and student activities from the American Revolution to the Civil Rights Movement. It is used by more than 1.5 million teachers and homeschool parents each year. More than 500,000 students participate in National History Day annually, a program that NEH has supported since 1977. Connecting students to primary source materials, the program fires the imagination and strengthens the intellect of its participants. NEH is also a strong supporter of iCivics. Founded by retired Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, iCivics offers online lesson plans and educational games that make learning about government interesting and fun. Last year, NEH and the Department of Education awarded $650,000 to iCivics to support the development of a new roadmap for history and civics education. NEH has helped to preserve Native American languages and cultures through the support of dictionaries, archives, and programming at tribal institutions. Native American history is a crucial element of our national story. NEH also funds discussion groups, oral history projects, and other educational programming to help the general public learn from military veterans and to aid their transition back into civilian life. This year also marks the 100th anniversary of women winning the right to vote in the United States. NEH is highlighting the 19th Amendment by funding a series of 26 short films about extraordinary American women. We also funded a forthcoming documentary film on the suffrage movement to air on PBS. In all of this, NEH is inspired by the words of Abraham Lincoln, who rightfully claimed that our nation is the last best hope of Earth. From preserving the papers of the founders to presenting the speeches of Martin Luther King Jr. NEH is helping Americans of all ages learn about our nation's remarkable history. The abolitionist Frederick Douglass wrote, quote, "A great battle lost or won is easily described, understood, and appreciated, but the moral growth of a great nation requires reflection as well as observation to appreciate it. It is our duty to support the moral and intellectual growth of our youth, to point the way for the next generation of Americans so that they too can live meaningful, impactful, fulfilling lives." Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Michael Solom, professor of geography at Texas State University and senior advisor for geography education at the American Association of Geographers. Thank you for inviting me to share some of the work that we're doing at the AAG to improve geography education. Every young American deserves an opportunity to learn geography as part of a well-rounded education. So why is that important? Consider the context. Young people today go to school during a time of massive global change driven by human activity. Transformations in Earth's climate, biodiversity, and land cover are so widespread that many scientists argue we have entered a new era in the planet's history, the Anthropocene, or Age of Humans. Yet there are deeply troubling signs in the latest geography report card that students are ill-equipped to grasp the nature of serious geographical problems, from global climate change to pandemics such as COVID-19. The declines in geography achievement come at a time when demand for geographic knowledge and skills is rising, and rising fast. Companies and governments increasingly rely on spatial data for making decisions. Technologies that map these data now serve a major function in the economy, science, and society. Yet NAEP reports that students are not learning geography at a level that is necessary to satisfy workforce needs in geography and geospatial related industries. The good news is that we have important sources of data at our disposal to better understand how we can improve geographic learning in schools. Thanks to an investment by the AAG and Texas State, we have a National Center for Research in Geography Education that coordinates research activities across the nation. Recently, the center received a grant from the National Science Foundation and a license from the Institute of Education Sciences to analyze restricted use NAEP data. These rich data sets will enable us to probe more deeply into the role of teacher time, teacher training, technology access, and other factors that may potentially explain patterns in geography achievement. Over the past 25 years, NAEP has informed us repeatedly that geography achievement scores are especially low among minority students. We also know more confident learners score higher on a geography assessment. Research suggests confidence to do science can be increased among all learners by teaching the applications and relevance of science to everyday life and wider society. This is exactly what we're trying to do in our Powerful Geography initiative with the help of teachers, professional geographers, and employer organizations. Let's watch a brief video of two social studies educators discussing powerful geography.
Powerful geography seems to align really well with the ultimate goal, which is to prepare students for the careers that they're going to find themselves competing for in a few years when they graduate.
The advantage with powerful geography is that connection to authentic application of the content. It's connecting it to how they would practice it in the field, and how it works in real life is critical for them to be able to take that information and transfer it and to apply it in different settings.
According to a government report citing NAEP, Access to geography in schools is limited by variations in state requirements and pressure to teach other subjects. Nonetheless, many states do encourage integrated social studies instruction. An excellent example is the GeoCivics project led by one of our center's grantees, Dr. Rebecca Theobald. GeoCivics is an interactive learning program that uses an online mapping tool to allow participants to create their own electoral districts, equipping teachers to prepare students to ask questions of legislators or members of independent commissions who will work with cartographers to redraw district maps. We are also linking geography with STEM subjects. Many careers in the geospatial services industry require knowledge of both geography and computer science, which are usually taught separately. With funding from NSF, the AAG's Encoding Geography Initiative is piloting a research practitioner partnership in California to develop inclusive curricula supporting combined geographic and computational thinking. Pictured here is Encoding Geography's founder, Dr. Colleen Donee, with some of our collaborators from the Sweetwater Union High School District, San Diego State University, California Geographic Alliance, and the University of California at Riverside. The AAG's GeoMentors program, under the direction of Dr. Candace Lubering, provides an infrastructure for scaling up encoding geography and similar initiatives to the national level. GeoMentors are volunteers who help K-12 schools, teachers, and informal education groups introduce GIS and geographic concepts to students using free cloud GIS software donated by Esri. To date, over 2,000 volunteers and nearly 8,000 schools have joined the program. To wrap up, geography is an essential knowledge and skill set for our future citizens, leaders, and emerging workforce. In light of the setbacks in the latest NAEP Geography Report Card, we must bolster our investments in geography education. Future NAEP assessments will be important because without them, we will be unable to say definitively whether our nation is making progress toward geographic literacy. I'd like to end by thanking my colleagues Colleen Donee, Michelle Kinzer, Thomas Larson, and Lisa Seamus for their contributions to this presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jessica Bagian, and I have the privilege of serving as Assistant State Superintendent and Chief Academic Policy Officer here in Louisiana at our Department of Education. Today, I want to talk to you a bit about our plan, which we call Louisiana Believes, and the ways in which we are trying to do a more concentrated effort at bringing all of these important social studies components and knowledge into our curriculum and into our assessment in a more robust way. Our plan in Louisiana is grounded on the very simple principle that our students are as smart and capable as any in the country, and we have seen strong gains from this plan. But we know that we have more to do. We are working toward a day when every student is on grade level for the next level of study. Our students have robust access to opportunities. We have robust supports for our schools that are struggling, and families have accurate information about the choices and learning opportunities in front of them. Specifically, to achieve that vision, we are focused on building classrooms where every day children build knowledge of the world, including so many of the important topics that have been discussed today. They're reading meaningful text, again, so many mentioned today, expressing ideas through writing and speaking, and solving complex problems as the world demands. In order to achieve that set of actions in classrooms all across Louisiana, we have worked very hard to build a coherent and aligned academic system. At the heart of that, of course, is strong standards, but also strong curriculum use, knowledge-rich curriculum that pulls on not just English language arts standards, but deep study of social studies content, alignment to professional development, and of course, aligned assessments. Again, we've seen strong progress over the past years, particularly since 2009. We've seen strong progress in our NAEP results, as well as a number of other academic measures. However, we know that there is more to do. And so as we confront the challenging results from the presentation today, as well as our own data in Louisiana, we are trying to take our work to the next level and further bring together the standards and curriculum with our assessment through the innovative assessment pilot allowed under ESSA. So specifically, we start from this place as the importance of has been imparted on by so many of the speakers today. And that is, it is our job as educators to impart knowledge of the world on our students so that they are ready to be engaged, informed citizens upon graduation. We believe in Louisiana that is best done through the use of strong curriculum. As part of an effort to strengthen the curriculum options in Louisiana, we, many years ago, began building what we call ELA guidebooks, what nationally is often called LearnZillion. This is a very rich, knowledge-rich, robust ELA curriculum built by teachers for teachers with a green rating on EdReports that is used in 75% of classrooms across Louisiana. This curriculum not only speaks to the English language arts standards, but increasingly integrates with our social studies standards and necessary learnings there, again, to confront the challenges that we're discussing today. The challenge before us, though, and the way in which we're trying to continue this work under the Innovative Assessment Pilot is to better bring together our assessment in alignment with what our standards and curriculum call for our children to know in order to be strong, engaged citizens. Specifically, our test currently, like so many ELA assessments across the country, measures skills, and it implicitly measures knowledge. And that's a real challenge that we're trying to confront for two reasons. First, in this knowledge-rich curriculum, which has great texts that are worth deep study, we are hearing from 95% of our teachers that though they stay and use this high-quality curriculum, they often feel at least occasionally pulled toward doing more pulled passage reads and having students respond to those. And they're doing that because English language arts assessments across America, which are often the heart of accountability systems and assessment systems, often ask us to have students reading text that are divorced from the daily learnings of their classroom. The challenge of that first is that it incentivizes teachers to veer from this knowledge-rich curricula and to spend their times perhaps practicing random passages rather than studying the incredibly important topics that have been named by so many speakers today. And the second challenge is, of course, that there are potential inequities within this. As you all probably know, there was a very famous study about reading in baseball. I believe this was done in 1988. And what it did was sort kids based on their previously determined reading levels, as well as their previously determined knowledge of baseball. And what probably will not surprise you is that students who knew a lot about baseball, actually regardless of their reading level, did quite well. I raise this here because if we really want to think about a future America where our teachers are incentivized to give our children access to knowledge about our country and the world, and if we want to make sure that we have accurate measures of what all of our children know, not just those of greatest means, we feel it's really important that we think about the role of assessments in changing that practice. In Louisiana, that looks like the creation of a humanities assessment. We started in 7th grade. We are now building out 6th through 8th and hope to expand from there. This is a through-year assessment that relies directly on the text and related text to those that students are studying in class. This is possible because 75% of our teachers are using the same high quality curriculum in those grades. And that curriculum integrates our social studies content. We are excited about this pilot. There is a lot left to learn, but we approach with urgency the challenge that's been named on this webinar today, and are optimistic about the ability for those of us who are leaders in the measurement space to innovate in the ways that we measure in order to incentivize the right actions. Again, our core goals being here to reinforce the best practices of staying focused and deep in text in order to build knowledge. And second, making sure that we have a level playing field for all children, regardless of circumstance.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shalina Warren, and I am a social studies teacher at Dunbar High School in Washington, D.C. I am smiling today because I get to focus my teaching efforts on civic engagement in order to counter the discouragement that many of my students face as teenagers. I love my students so much, and my pictures you see in the background are an extension of that love as I use them to collect our memories together, but to also have evidence of everything we do. I want my students to see the changes they have made as they become more active citizens, physically and socially. Come with me on a quick journey rooted in student civic experiences. Welcome to Paul Laurence Dunbar High School. Don't let this beautiful building built in 2013 fool you. Our school has a rich legacy. Eleanor Holmes Norton, one of our famous alumni, is the namesake for our Law and Public Policy Academy. We teach our students that their voices matter by supporting them in a range of community action initiatives, many requiring students to engage with stakeholders while showing them what organized, intentional action and community improvement looks like. On this cold fall day, my students helped to beautify our beloved school grounds with our gloves, trash bags, and energetic spirit, which was one of our concerns in our local community. Many of my students think they are too young to enact change and as a result are not empowered. Our academy serves as a vehicle to expose students to problem solving and communication skills through experiential learning. Enter Jahara Brockington, an academy law leader who doubted herself a lot until she realized she could do anything she wanted. According to youth.gov, civic engagement is working to make a difference in the civic life of one's community. Our academy nurtures students who are actively involved in their community using their voice to affect change. Jahara won a trip to San Francisco for winning a national Facebook competition for her community action project on reinstating the right to vote to elect convicted felons. For the past 3 years, the Dunbar Law and Public Policy Academy has partnered with the Paul Weiss Law Firm in DC to prepare our students for future legal careers. Volunteers from the law firm teach classroom lessons, and then students are invited to the law firm to participate in a legal conference where they are challenged with a mock trial or debate activities that promote critical thinking skills, which is one of the pillars of our academy. Students leave excited about the different opportunities law firms could present for them. Many of my students are not regularly exposed to opportunities like this, which helps them see themselves in spaces they would never imagine. The Dunbar Law and Public Policy Academy partners with MICVA Challenge DC. Participation in civic engagement activities can help youth become better informed about current events. One of those experiences was participation in the Get Out the Vote campaign in Manassas, Virginia, in which a few of our academy students met up at a local candidate's headquarters, received training and materials, and were sent off to knock on doors to get potential voters to the polls on the upcoming primary election. On this cold and windy November day, not only did we meet new people, we went away with a feeling of accomplishment that we had helped people. I present one of our academy leaders, Larry Hyman. A group of MICVA Challenge DC teachers are being introduced to the Project Soapbox competition, and Larry's speech is one of the examples chosen to highlight the power of student voice. Larry spoke up about gun violence, an emotional and heartbreaking subject that affects his daily life. It isn't until after I have them write speeches or participate in civic fairs that involve community members listening to them that they realize that they too can make change. People will listen. This picture is proof of that, if nothing else. The first issue we focused on in our academy was police brutality. We surveyed the school community and many had been impacted by police brutality. We created an educational and letter writing campaign. Then we connected with MPD police officers for a roundtable discussion about community relations. The common denominator was fear, because once the police officers and students started talking, they realized they had more things in common than not. Having students and police officers talk to one another and develop empathy and respect for each other was powerful. One of our Academy pillars is for students to know their rights. Two of our Academy law leaders, Richard Bangura and Larry Hyman, represented our Academy in the Find Your Balance Challenge. During this one-day event modeled after the show Shark Tank, they won $4,000 for our school for their student leadership program called All Rise, where student leaders become translators between the school administration and the student body as they work to provide more exposure opportunities for our students via enriching experiences off campus and productive meetings on campus. The grant money will be used to help give students a sense of identity and community. These young men lived out one of our Academy pillars because they enacted change at Dunbar. Daria Boyd, one of my law leaders, has rewarded us with a type of poetic justice thanks to her linguistic gift. Here she is being recorded as a featured speaker for Discovery Education's Constitution Day programming, in which she was interviewed as well as wrote and performed her own poem about student voice. And I quote, "We the people, in order to have a more perfect union, must use our voice. In the US, our right to speak is protected. Our right to freely speak is the first thing that is mentioned. Yet we the people have gone silent." End quote. She uses her gifts of writing and speaking to affect change. Since I have known her, she has lived up to the Academy pillar of using your voice for the betterment of society. We are fortunate enough to partner with Georgetown Law School to immerse our students in real-world experiences. Students sit in a law class and a law professor spends time with them going over what life is like in law school. Then students interact with each other to compete with problem-solving tasks that involves them analyzing and determining faults in an ethical legal case. A discussion ensues and students end up taking sides in the case. Those are good times. Experiences such as this is one way we continue to uphold the Academy pillar of students being mentally and socially prepared for life after high school. Welcome to the Honorable Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton's office. A few of our students, including Keith-Saya Polite, whom you see here, spoke with Norton's staff assistant after attending the lobby weekend for Atrocity Prevention with STAND, the student-led movement to end mass atrocities. We made our way to Capitol Hill to lobby Congress for support to help end these atrocities overseas. Not only do we work to improve our local communities, we also want to improve global communities. Her staff assistant took us to see Ms. Norton as she was holding a press conference on the lawn of the Capitol building. To actually see democracy in action for our students was priceless. We asked students to think of their ideal school, and then we brainstormed why we didn't have the ideal school now. From that discussion, we created our Action Civics Fair project, topic, Peer Court, Solutions to Misbehavior. This idea fit perfectly with our Academy pillar that students should be empowered to learn from their experiences instead of being punished for them. So we presented this project at MICVA Challenge DC's Action Civics Fair, meeting many community members, including city council members. Richard, you see here, is discussing our project with the president of MICVA Challenge, Brian Brady. Many people supported this idea of having a pure court that would hear certain student cases and provide another discipline alternative that would benefit all students in the long run. After the Action Civics Fair, Richard's class divided up into student committees to survey the school community. The surveys indicated there was a need for this initiative. So our next step was to pull school discipline statistics and schedule a town hall meeting to discuss the peer court idea with the larger school body. Many ideas and suggestions sprung out of this conversation. We gathered data from each town hall participant with a questionnaire. Our students affirmed we should focus on peer court as being an actual component of our school. We were ready to conduct trial runs of our peer court pilot program when we were approached by iCivics. My students helped co-design our own peer-to-peer court. Inspired by the iCivics game, We the Jury, our students served as lawyers, judges, and jurors and heard cases from classmates. Excited by this innovative approach, Soledad O'Brien featured the project in one of her matter-of-fact show segments. It was evident that putting students in the driver's seat is beneficial on so many levels because the court was created, run, and depended solely on Academy students, as you can see from our picture. They became the true leaders and innovators we know they could be. Talk about positive student change. Fast forward to our progress today. We created a training manual and recruitment plan for our peer court program. We met with school officials to get approval and a commitment to have peer court as an official program at Dunbar for next year. I used my peer mediation class to begin training for our peer court so we could begin to hear cases this spring. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, "We cannot always build a future for our youth, but we can always build our youth for the future." By creating more civic-minded students in our high schools, we will not only create habits that can be sustained into adulthood, but it can provide immediate results, such as increasing students' sense of self. I hope you enjoyed this civic journey you were led on today. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Jeffrey Rosen, and I am the president of the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia. It's such an honor to talk with you today about the urgent importance of helping Americans of all ages educate themselves about the Constitution and our founding principles in this challenging time. As John Peedy so eloquently said, quoting Jefferson, "America cannot survive ignorant and free." And the National Constitution Center stands ready to be a shining beacon of light for Americans of all ages and backgrounds as they educate themselves about our Constitution and founding principles. The Constitution Center was founded as a private nonprofit during the bicentennial of the Constitution, and it was given an inspiring mission by the US Congress to disseminate information about the Constitution on a nonpartisan basis to increase awareness and understanding of the Constitution among the American people. And I'm so excited to have this chance to tell you about the amazing remote learning opportunities that we've launched that both before and after the COVID crisis have made the Constitution Center America's leading platform for nonpartisan civics education. So here you can see a picture of the Constitution Center. It's this inspiring building on Independence Mall, right across from Independence Hall, the most sacred constitutional ground in America. But the Constitution Center is also an idea, and that idea is rooted in an online platform we've launched called the Interactive Constitution. The Interactive Constitution brings together the leading liberal and conservative scholars in America to write about every clause of the Constitution, describing what they agree about and what they disagree about. It is thrilling to see these common statements, which are like unanimous Supreme Court opinions that citizens of all perspectives can embrace. The Interactive Constitution has been so successful that it's gotten more than 30 million hits since it launched in 2015. As a result, the Constitution Center is now the fifth most visited museum website in America and the seventh most visited museum website in the world. Because as Americans of all ages turn to get trusted, balanced answers about constitutional questions, they are finding this amazing online tool. But that's not all. I always feel like a Ginsu knife salesman when I talk about the Interactive Constitution because I'm so excited about the resources that it includes. The Interactive Constitution includes videos with Supreme Court Justices Elena Kagan and Neil Gorsuch and the leading scholars in America about all provisions of the Constitution. It includes an amazing provision called the drafting table, where you can explore early drafts of every constitutional provision. It includes the weekly podcasts that I host that bring together America's leading liberal and conservative scholars to discuss constitutional issues in the news, such as those related to the Constitution and the COVID crisis. In all of these learning materials, the Constitution Center follows a rigorous approach. We ask citizens to separate your political from your constitutional views. I'm a law professor. I teach at George Washington Law School, and I tell learners of all ages just what I tell my students. Don't ask what you think the government should do when you're learning about the Constitution, but what you think the Constitution allows or forbids it to do. And by separating your political from your constitutional views, you can elevate yourself above partisan politics and make up your mind about what the Constitution allows or forbids. Friends, I'm so excited to share that since the COVID crisis, the Constitution Center has launched an exciting new series of online courses. I just taught one today at 1 p.m. I've been teaching them along with our dynamic Chief Learning Officer, Curry Sautner, every Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday at 1 p.m. And these classes they've attracted more than 15,000 students since they launched just a few weeks ago, showing the incredible hunger that there is for this nonpartisan content. A session with Ken Burns, the filmmaker, brought 2,000 students. Yesterday, we talked to Eric Foner, the leading historian of Reconstruction at Columbia University. 1,500 students signed into that. And in each of these classes, I look into the Zoom camera and tell the students exactly what I'm telling you. Let's separate our political from our constitutional views. Let's begin with the constitutional text. Let's look at how it evolved over time. Let's hear what the Supreme Court has said about it. And I always urge the students to read the majority opinions as well as the dissents so that you can hear the best arguments on both sides. There was a wonderful moment in one of our early classes when one of our students tweeted in the chat box, "Hi, I'm Oliver. I'm only 12. I'm not sure I can understand the dissents." But he could and he did, and we had a great discussion about the arguments on both sides there. So what these online classes have convinced me and my colleagues is that there is a hunger in this country for balanced, trusted content. There is an audience for it, and now we have a platform for it, and it's called the Interactive Constitution, and it is free and online, and any citizen can learn from it, can click on any of the 80 clauses of the Constitution and find this amazing wealth of material with the videos and the explainers and the early drafts, and now the opportunity to sign up for live classes as well as constitutional exchanges that can link classrooms across the country for live discussions about the Constitution, moderated by my colleagues and me, and also by judges and master teachers. What an amazing opportunity this new technology gives us to spread all of this constitutional light during a time of challenge. The Constitutional Ambassadors Program you see here can bring students to the Constitution Center for real-time learning, but increasingly we're finding during this remote learning time that these classroom exchanges will provide an opportunity for real-time learning about the Constitution that will enrich classes of all ages long after the crisis has passed. We're going to continue to offer these classes so that anyone in the country, and teachers, if you are listening, go to constitutioncenter.org and sign up your students now, whether they're learning at home or learning at school, and you will find balanced, trusted content that is sponsored by both the Conservative Federalist Society and the Progressive American Constitution Society, ensuring you of the nonpartisan reliability of all of this wonderful material. Friends, my colleagues and I are crusaders for constitutional education. We are on a mission, and that mission is to inspire learners of all ages, not only learners from K through 12 or perhaps middle school through 12, although you can't start too early, but also adult learners who can sign on to the podcast and also sign on to the thrilling live town hall programs, such as the one about a debate about the history and meaning of the Electoral College yesterday that got 750 live people signing up at noon because they were so hungry to get those good arguments. And all of it is rooted in the Interactive Constitution and rooted in this crucially important idea that we rigorously view these matters in a nonpartisan way and separate our political from our constitutional views. These numbers that you see here, the slides were prepared at the beginning of the crisis. As I say, these numbers have now doubled to more than 15. I think we're now at about nearly 20,000 with the recent events this week. This is a movement, and I want to invite all of you to join it and to sign up, and all of us are doing our part, all of the great partners you're hearing from. What inspiring stories are told by Shalila and Michael and Jessica and John and the NEH are doing such a superb job in inspiring everyone to pull together to beat the drum for civics and to make this a national crusade. There are many things that divide this country right now, but there's one thing that unites us, and that is our founding principles rooted in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, and the need to learn about them and debate them in a nonpartisan way. So I will just end by urging you to join us, to connect with us. Go to constitutioncenter.org, sign up for the classes, go to the Interactive Constitution, and educate yourself about the Constitution. And I'll just end with the inspiring words that I always find so galvanizing of Justice Louis Brandeis: if we would govern ourselves by the light of reason, we must let our minds be bold. Thanks so much, and thank you for educating yourself about the U.S. Constitution.
Thank you very, very much to all of our incredible panelists. Special thank you to the technology team behind the scenes working through these things. We have received several questions, and we are going to do our best to get through as many as possible in the last 5, perhaps even 7 minutes of the presentation. Let me start with John and Jeff. Your passion is incredible, and it's coming through for both of you. One of our questions was, what additional partners would you like to see also advocating alongside you in terms of getting access, good quality access to geography, to history, to civics education? What partners would you like to see connect? I send that question to John and Jeff.
Thank you for that question. One pleasure of awarding grants is there are no shortage of partners, and so there are a number of organizations that focus in the K-12 environment that we work with. And I would note that I don't think we always think as educators about the importance of the museum world. We know, for example, for college, the importance of the American Historical Association. But I think for many of us that fell in love with history as young people, it was because of a librarian and because of a museum. So I would say that as much as we can, if our schools will make sure that they have connections with larger cultural organizations, such as the Constitution Center, I think that would go a long way about creating a diverse learning environment.
Thank you.
And thank you so much, John, for urging schools to reach out to the Constitution Center and come to us physically if you can. And I would echo John's call to schools. The partner that the Constitution Center most needs is teachers. All the brilliant, inspiring teachers like Shalina and others are the ones who will ensure that students sign on to the online classes and use the interactive Constitution. So it's an opportunity. We have this free resource, and we need your help, teachers, in spreading the word. So whether it's at the school district level, where we're working, for example, with Dr. William Haidt, the superintendent of schools in Philadelphia, and also with the Charter Schools Association, with parochial schools. We've got to get this material to underserved communities, and the main thing to do is just to help us reach those students and teachers. So if you are a teacher or an administrator or a principal who's listening right now, reach out to me at the Constitution Center, reach out to Curry Sautner, and help us connect to you. What we, like so many of the great grantees of NEH and the great schools and organizations here, we're all doing this great work. We need your help in distributing it. And I know that you'll do that. Thank you so much for helping us spread the word and spread the light.
Thank you very, very much. Our next question, I think, goes to Jessica and Shalina. Both of you have been very passionate and are advocating for more complex, more experiential learning inside of our classrooms, right along with all of the facts and knowledge. And we have a question here that asks, what do we face at the state level and the classroom level? What are our biggest challenges in trying to improve our civics and history curriculum?
I'll jump in first. Thank you for the question. I would say for us, we want to support great teachers like Shalina to be able to create the sort of environments that she described earlier for children all across Louisiana as well as in DC. And the biggest way for us to get to scale on that is to provide knowledge-rich curriculum as a base for her and her colleagues to work from and to build lessons from in their classrooms. In doing that, we're at great scale, as I mentioned before. Over 95% of classrooms now use a Tier 1 curriculum. 75% of the English language arts are using the same curriculum in Louisiana. But the second challenge we ran into is that often the assessment was incentivizing many good actions, but some actions that were deterring teachers from staying deep in the text and doing the sort of knowledge building activities that she so thoughtfully described earlier. And so for us, this is about reinforcing and supporting high quality curriculum, but also making sure that our assessments and professional development align to that to reinforce the best teacher actions on behalf of building knowledge for all children.
And to piggyback off of this great question, just simply administrators and other leaders in the district and state level to encourage teachers and support teachers to go outside of the classroom for learning. Learning just doesn't happen within those four walls. It's everywhere. And many times if you, as we said earlier, making connections, if we can connect our curriculum to what is going outside of the classroom, the kids will get it. They want to be a part of it. They'll see the relevance of it. Just opening up the door for more freedom of teachers to expand the curriculum and to be creative in how they are able to reach the students based on how they learn.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So our last question, I cannot believe time has gone so fast and so far, but our last question actually goes to Michael. And this is actually, I think, harkening back to some questions we heard earlier about relevancy and also career planning. So Michael, you are actually a senior advisor for geography and you teach in that space. What have you seen as the biggest challenges and the best successes in helping to make this subject matter relevant to students, not just in the classroom, but also in terms of considering careers related to geography? And feel free to expand actually to history and civics as well.
Well, thanks for the question. And thanks to everyone who presented today. I learned a lot and it's really exciting. And I hope we continue these conversations. The question of relevancy of content, you know, we all want geography to be taught in an academically rigorous way, right? We want the content to be strong. That's why we have standards. But I'm wondering, moving forward, we need to also do a little bit more work in terms of academic content that's rigorous, but that students perceive to be relevant, students perceive to be significant. Students generate students' interest, gives them confidence to do geography. And that approach, I think, has to originate from the student context. We got to draw from work in curriculum theory that points to the importance of context and relating our instruction to students' communities, their sense of culture, heritage, and then turn to people who actually have expertise in our subject areas, and that would be our professionals, the graduates from our academic programs. They do amazing things. They do amazing things in their work. They do amazing things in their private lives as citizens, in which they use their disciplinary knowledge to make a difference. And I think if we can draw some examples of how that's at work in local communities, that can help provide teachers with sort of curriculum guidance of how they can support standards-based education, but do it in a way that we think may have more resonance among the learners. I think many of the techniques that were described by the presenters today have so much potential to assist in that goal. So I think we just need to recommit to getting back to work, collecting data, evaluating what we do, and share what we learn so that we hopefully have a better report card next time.
Thank you very, very much, Michael. And thank you to all of our panelists, to John and Jeff and Jessica, Shalina, and Michael, and of course our earlier presentation. I've heard things, and I've heard things restated: interest, context, confidence, more than just the facts. These are the kinds of things that our students are engaging with and are willing to bring to the table as we wrap around them with this level of excitement and passion for the discussions. I know that this particular time may feel like we are making history, but the truth of the matter is we are always making history. And while we may have this poll or that poll saying that more than ever our nation is civically engaged, the truth of the matter is we are always civically engaged and need to be engaged. And I dare say, being trapped in my condo has given me a special appreciation of geography, and I would like to see more of it sometime soon. So we're in a space of heightened relevance, I think, for all of these subjects. And I want to thank all of our panelists. I want to thank the staff and the team at NCES, as well as the staff, the team, and the board at the National Assessment Governing Board, and everyone that has tuned in, our teachers, our parents, our policymakers, our elected officials. We are the wind beneath our students' wings. There are challenging results, but that simply means that there is more promise ahead of us. Thank you. Please stay connected to our websites and do your own deep dive into the nation's report card so that you too can keep on top of the progress of our nation's children. Be safe, stay calm. Have a good day.